Now, I want to address one other point that's been made about Judge Sotomayor is in her capacity as a judge, and it was something actually Senator Shaheen mentioned, and that's his temperament issues. There have been some stories and comments, mostly anonymous, I would note, that question Judge Sotomayor's judicial temperament. Well, according to one news story about this topic, Judge Sotomayor developed a reputation for asking tough questions at oral arguments and for being sometimes brusque and curt with lawyers who were not prepared to answer them. So she was a little curt, one anonymous source said. Well, where I come from, asking tough questions and having very little patience for unprepared lawyers is the very definition of being a judge. I can't tell you how many times I've seen judges get very impatient with lawyers who weren't prepared or who didn't know the answer to a question. As a lawyer, you owe it to the bench and to your clients to be well prepared as you possibly can. As Nina Totenberg said on National Public Radio, if Sonia Sotomayor sometimes dominates oral argument at her court, if she's feisty, even pushy, then she would fit right in the United States Supreme Court. And I would add this to that comment. Surely we have come to a time in this country where we can confirm as many gruff to the point female judges as we've confirmed gruff to the point male judges. Just think how far we've come with this nominee, Mr. President. When Sandra Day O'Connor graduated from law school 50-plus years ago, the only offer that she got from a law firm was for a position as a legal secretary. She had this great background, a very impressive background, and yet the only offer that she got was as a legal secretary. Judge Ginsburg, who now sits on the court, faced similar obstacles. When she entered Harvard in the 1950s, she was the only one of 9 women in a class of more than 500, one of 9 women in a class of more than 500, and one professor actually asked her to justify taking a place that would have gone to a man in that class in Harvard. 9 women, 500 spots, and someone actually asked her to justify the fact that she was there. I suppose she could justify it now by saying she's now on the United States Supreme Court. Later, Justice Ginsburg was passed over for a prestigious clerkship despite her impressive credentials. Looking at Judge Sotomayor's long record as a lawyer, as a prosecutor, and a judge, you can see we've come a long way. She was confirmed by this Senate for the District Court. She was nominated at that point by the first President Bush. She was confirmed by this Senate for the Second Circuit, and she now faces confirmation, hearing before our Judiciary Committee, and a confirmation again for a position with the United States Supreme Court. I will tell you this, Mr. President, after learning about Judge Sotomayor, her background, her legal career, her judicial record, like so many of my colleagues, I'm very impressed. To use President Obama's words, I hope that Judge Sotomayor will bring to her nomination hearing and to the Supreme Court, if she's confirmed, not only the knowledge and the experience acquired over a course of a brilliant legal career, but the wisdom accumulated from an inspiring life's journey. You know, actually today, Justice O'Connor was on the Today Show, and she was asked about her work on the court and what it was like, and she was actually asked about Judge Sotomayor, and what she said was, she said, and I'm just looking over here at this, she actually said, she was asked, when you retired, you let it be known that you would like a woman to replace you, and you were sort of disappointed when a woman didn't replace you. So what is your reaction to Justice Sotomayor's nomination? And Justice O'Connor said, well, of course, I'm pleased that we will have another woman on the court. I do think it's important not to have just one. Our nearest neighbor, Canada, also has a court of 9 members. And in Canada, there's a woman Chief Justice, and there are 4 women all told on the Canadian court. And then she was asked, do you think there's a right number of women who should be on the court? Justice O'Connor this morning said, no, of course not. But then she pointed out, this is a quote, but about half of all law graduates today are women, and we have a tremendous number of qualified women in the country who are serving as lawyers, so they ought to be represented on the court. She was also asked later in the interview about opponents of Justice Sotomayor who have brought up this term activist judge, and she was asked that, I know that's a term that you have railed against in the past. What is it about the term that you object to? And she answered, I don't think the public understands what's meant by it. It's thrown around by many in the political field, and I think that probably for most users of the term, they're distinguishing between the role of a legislator and a judge, and they say that a judge should not legislate. The problem, of course, Justice O'Connor said, is that at the appellate level, and the Supreme Court is the top of the appellate level, rulings of the court do become binding law. And so it's a little hard to talk in terms of who's an activist. And I, again, ask people to look at Justice Sotomayor's opinions. When I talked to her about this, she talked about how she really uses a set formula, laying out the facts, laying out the law, showing how the law applies to the facts, and then reaching a decision. And you also look at her record here, where, in fact, when she was on a 3-judge panel with two other judges, when you look at her record of when she agreed with judges who had been appointed by a Republican president, 95% of the time they reached the same decision. So unless you believe those Republican-appointed judges are somehow activist judges, then I guess you would say that she's an activist judge. But I think when you look at her whole record, you see someone who's a moderate, sometimes coming down on one side and sometimes coming down on another. I can tell you as a former prosecutor, I didn't always just look at whether I agreed with the judge or not when I was trying to figure out if someone would be a good judge. I would look at whether they applied the laws to the facts, whether they were fair. And sometimes our prosecutor's office wouldn't agree with the judge's decision. We'd argued vehemently for a different decision. But in the end, when we evaluated these judges, when we decided whether we thought they were fair and whether they'd be a fair person to have on a case, we really looked at that whole experience. We looked at that whole experience to make a decision about whether or not this was a judge who could be fair. And that's what I think when you look at her record, and I'm looking very much to this hearing where we're going to explore a number of these cases again. Some of the colleagues on one side of the aisle will agree with one case, will disagree with the other. Other side of the aisle would have made a decision the other way the other. But you have to look at her record as a whole. And when you look at that record, you will see someone of experience, someone who is thoughtful, someone who makes a decision based on the facts and based on the law. So I'm very much looking forward to these hearings. Mr. President, I know that some of my colleagues are coming down here as we speak. I'm looking forward to their arrival as we become, as I said, ambassadors of truth to get these facts out, as so many things have been bantied about, and names and other things that really get into people's heads. And I think it's really important that for all of those watching C-SPAN right now, and for all of those that are in the galleries today, that people take these facts away from them, the facts of her experience, over 100 years of judicial experience, more than anyone, 100 years, when you look back 100 years, she has more experience on the bench than any of the justices that were nominated. You have to go back 100 years to find someone with that much experience. And you look at that work that she's done as a prosecutor, you look at the work that she has done throughout her whole life, where she basically came from nothing, worked her way, got into good college, got into a good law school, did it on her own, maybe with a little help from her mom who bought those Encyclopedia Britannicas. So as I said at the beginning, this is a nominee who not only understands the law and understands the Constitution, but also understands America. Thank you very much, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.